Hi, if you or your children are suffering because of your relationship with your ex-partner, because it's stressed or strained, or maybe they're just not a nice person, this show is for you. Welcome to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brooke Olson and Charlie Jewett. Enjoy another episode now.
So welcome back, everybody, to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brook Olson. And today we've got my special guest, Susie Walton. Susie is the founder of Indigo Village, and I had the pleasure to do my parent-teacher training with her 18 years ago.
A few years ago.
It's been a day and a half, and you guys have heard me refer to her a lot. Her program is one of, I think, the most centering parenting programs that I have ever run across, and her experience in this field, I think, is unparalleled. So welcome, Susie.
Thank you. It's good to be back, Brooke. It's good to see you, almost in person.
Almost. We haven't seen each other in person in way too long.
Yeah.
We live in the same city.
I agree.
So what I want to go down the back alleys of today, if you will, is raising teenagers. This is something that comes across a lot with the parents that I'm dealing with, our listeners, and we've got a little bit of extra twist in it because of the high conflict, and I've sent a lot of my people in your direction, so you get a flavor of what that looks like. Mm-hmm. And we're also coming out of a really difficult time in everybody's history with COVID and the lockdown and the lack of social engagement. So, teenagers locked up and not having social activities is kind of deadly in a lot of ways. So just to open in this, what are your thoughts about some of the things that the teenagers are dealing with, and how do you look at coming in to start to engage with them in a way that doesn't have a lot of backlash?
Yeah. There's been a lot going on this past year, and I always tell parents, you get to write the story on how it all ends. And a lot has to depend on how you handle the quarantine and COVID and the whole 9 yards, right? I feel of all the age groups, I feel like the teens probably had it the toughest because, as you and I both know, teens this is their time developmentally when they're supposed to be creating a separation from their parents. It gives them the strength to move on into the adulthood. And so for the most part, most of these teens were stuck with their parents. And I get parents were stuck with teens, but they're the ones that are supposed to be branching out right now. They're the ones, it's like I kind of make fun, like, those first 12 years of your life, or maybe 10 years, you can't do no wrong. And then the teenage years, it's almost like feel like you need to wear a name tag. Hey, I'm your mom. Mm-hmm. Hi, don't forget to say good morning, right? And then off they go, and you don't see them again till whenever in the evening. And so that didn't happen this past year. And I feel like for a lot of teens, like some teens, I think all teens handled it differently. I know teens who are used to being in sports. Some of them had a really difficult time because for them, they had to figure out how to keep themselves motivated and in shape during the off season without a coach telling them what to do. And for a lot of sport athletes, that's the first time ever because they've been in training for all these years, having a coach tell them what to do. So a lot of them had a rough time getting inspired. And I feel like a lot of kids in sports decided by the end not to do sports. And some for the reason they just got so caught up in screen time and videos and others took actually a step back to see, is this really what I want to do with my life? So, I feel like teenagers are on a brand new platform. They really have reassessed a lot of them what they want to do or what they don't want to do. I have a friend whose son decided he wanted to graduate in March as a senior, and then he went off for some internship down in South America or Mexico for marine environment before he goes off to college. I have another client whose son just said, I'm done with school. He's a fisherman. He works off a fishing boat, and that's what his passion is, and that's what he wants to do. So now they're in conflict with like trying to figure out how to get him to live because he's such a nature kid. Like he figured out this is me, and he still needs to at least get a GED. You know what I mean? Which is, so is that. But for parents out there, it's like, it's time for you to stop for a minute and listen. Like, what are your expectations of your teens? Are they what they were a year ago? Because if they are, you might need to look at a little differently at what they're like now, and work with them on telling them what your expectations are and find out what their expectations are.
Right. You taught this a lot around what our expectations are of our kids and what our kids' expectations are of themselves, and being able to separate those two. And I think what I heard you saying to some degree here, Susie, was that during this course of being in lockdown, having the lack of outside stimulus pushing them to do something, they had that opportunity to go inside and go, what is it that I don't want? Or what is it that I do want? And that in and of itself was a different form of differentiation from the parents, rather than going out, going in. And, one of the things that I bring forward to my listeners and my people in my classes all of the time is this notion of allowing the kids to have their internal motivation of what drives them in that direction. And it's not always in alignment with what we want for them.
Spot on. And I have another family. I know that the teenager, she's passionate about sports, but she was losing interest because there wasn't sports. But the parents sat down with her and just asked her, like, do you want to keep doing sports, or what's going on? But they have that kind of relationship where they can have those conversations, uncomfortable conversations. And she said, I do, but I kind of feel lost because, once again, she wasn't going to a practice. So they talked about her maybe setting some goals, and they didn't know what she was going to do with it. But one day they walked into their room, and on her back door, there's a mirror on her bedroom door. And with lipstick, she wrote kind of like a schedule for her every day to keep herself in shape, and she did that. And that helped get her moving again, to the direction of staying the athlete that she wanted. But she had to make that transition. And I feel like all kids, I mean, I know we're talking about sports right now, but even with school, it's like what you just mentioned, they had to start going, if they're going to do this, internally figure it out for themselves. And, there was already enough chaos in the world, and this just added to that chaos. But I feel like a lot of teenagers had to grow up pretty quickly this past year if they're going to continue on a path.
Oh my God, yeah. And the disorientation for them to the world, and the lack, I think, of skill sets to be able to navigate that some adults have, that being in the world, it's like, okay, I've been through this before. They don't have those skill sets.
Yes, exactly.
And how do we as parents, Susie, begin to engage? And I'm going to layer this for a minute, but how are we able to engage with them and bring that conversation forward? Because teenagers, by their very structure, have a tendency to be oppositional. So if it's coming out of my mouth, I'm going to be in opposition to taking that route. And when we're looking at parents that are in opposition to one another in their parenting style, and we've got a child that we want to guide into or find a way into opening this door of conversation to explore what's going on for them, to have their trust and their willingness to tell us what's up. And that hasn't been developed either in the family of origin before it was split, or after the split. So that was a big load that I just handed to you.
Yeah, and I feel like it's pretty much the same in a family where they're not split. Because in almost every situation, parents see parenting different. just because of our own product of our own environments, right?
Right.
So, but in general, I mean, you're talking about teens opening up and having a conversation with us about what's going on. The thing is, we didn't even know what was going on this past year. I mean, just think of all the times we wear a mask, don't wear a mask, or don't go to the ocean, don't, rules just kept being thrown out at us from, the higher beings, or however, whatever you want to say, source of information. We were all like, what's going on? And so I think it's real important for parents to be super honest with their teens. It's like, I didn't know what was going on either. Like, for me to be home all the time, like, part of that I loved, and part was really hard for me because I didn't know how to keep, there was times I didn't know how to be motivated. And I can't even imagine for you, because if you think about it, Brooke, the teenage years, that is the natural time to process in the brain where it unleashes the risk taking. That's why teens do not crazy things, because of that risk part of the brain finally opens, poof. And they're supposed to be doing risky things. And the riskiest thing they can do is play video games, and that's why I feel like a lot got stuck on that, because it was, there's some kind of excitement in video games, right?
Or stimulation for sure.
Yeah. So I feel like for parents, it's having that open conversation, being okay, being two things all kids need of all ages. We're focusing on teens, but one is to be treated with respect, and the other one is to be told the truth. So truth and respect are the two components in any conversation with your kids of any ages. Dealing with the teens, being truthful, telling them how it was for you. Don't say how you got through it unless they ask you how did you get through it, but just to let them know if it was difficult for you or what it kept from being difficult, and being realistic. I don't even know what to tell you now. You're vacillating on the your grades, or you're going to school or going to college or playing sports or whatever it might be. And I wish I had like 3 steps that you could do to complete that, but I don't. So we're in this together. I just want you to know that I'm on your side. Like, I'm here for you. And, and I want you to be able to tell me stuff. And a lot of teens are like, that's BS. You're telling me that, but the minute I do something wrong, you're all over my case. If I don't hand in homework, you're all over me. Like, you're telling me this, but then you're sitting there bad mouthing my dad or bad mouthing my mom. Like, how am I supposed to, they're thinking, how am I supposed to trust you? How do I not know if you're not bad mouthing me? And that's another reason, however situations are in 2 households, not to badmouth the other parent.
Absolutely. And this notion of you've got a child, and this child is with you for whatever time they're with you, and the relationship that's created there is what the relationship's going to be. And if it's bad mouth, or if there's lack of trust, or if there's a lot of criticism, they're not going to come to you and open up. But the presence, the creating of the presence, the vulnerability, the openness, and being, I think it's important as a parent for us to be willing to take an emotional hit when our kids are pissed off without being reactive to it. And not take it personal, but just being able to take it as an expression of their frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to recognize if your teen says something to you that hurts you, guess what? They're hurting. Right. We can't say things that are hurtful to people if we're not hurting inside. We can't say angry things to people unless we're feeling angry inside. So yes, you need to self-protect in those situations and say, wow, wait, what you just said was really hurtful. So rather than hurt you back, I'm going to step away for a little bit, because that's not who you are. That's what they need to hear. That's not right. Who you are. There's something going on, and I don't know what, but I feel like I'm going to react, and I don't want to, so I'm going to walk away. And then really have that kind of a conversation at neutral times. Hey, Brooke, I've noticed sometimes when I say something, all of a sudden you like boom at me, and in that moment I feel hurt or I feel mad at what you just said. And I also know that can't happen unless you're hurt or mad inside. So rather than me react back to self-protect myself, I'm going to walk away and just regroup and then come back and have the conversation with you. I mean, what teen's going to not want to hear that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm glad you brought that in, because those are words that, like you said, there's nothing sharp in that other than a statement of your experience. and also a reflection of that's not who you are. I used to do something with my grandson when he was living with me that was similar, and I'm interested for your feedback on it, because it was a little bit like what you just did, but I was functioning within boundaries and kind of, this is where we are, and an understanding of how we are with each other.
Mhm.
And I would go down the road something along the lines of, wow, that was harsh. That landed hard on me. And I know that you've experienced this a lot in your world. And I wonder if you're willing to look around a little bit and see where you are, see who you're with, and is this how we do this with one another? How does that land or sound within your template, Susie?
Sort of perfect.
Okay.
You're being truthful. You're speaking your truth. You're saying how you feel, but you're not putting it back on him.
Right.
And obviously, when I hear that conversation, Brooke, obviously you have been building trust with him up until that moment also. So he
Right.
could, like, yes, you're right, Gramps. Like, yes, that's not who we are. That's not what we do. Yes, that's my old story.
Yeah.
So that's another thing with you parents. Like, you might have a really good conversation, good connection with your teen, but maybe in the other world, in the other parent household, it's not that way. And so they make, sometimes people strike out at the people who they love the most, which is ridiculous, but it happens because they feel like they can trust you. And so then just what you, Brooke, were saying, then you have to say, this isn't who we are.
Right.
You think about, look at back, words that, that might be over somewhere else. And not to say at your dad's or your mom's, but at other places, but between you and I, this isn't how we do things. Right. Talk to me. Let me hear the uncomfortable, whatever thing you have to tell me right now.
And again, this is something that you just said is built up over time. This is, we can't have an expectation. I think with dealing with teenagers, often there's such a reactiveness in them that it elicits a reactiveness in us.
Yes.
And to really have a willingness to not take their venom personally, but as an expression of where they're confused and they're really struggling in their world. And if we're not reactive to that, they begin to trust that they can come forward a little bit more, because at least in this world that we're talking about today with most of the parents that are going to be listening to this podcast, at least in one house, there is an explosiveness or there is a reactiveness. And to be open and willing to have those huge waves break over us is an important piece of building that foundational trust.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it takes practice. And that's why I'm saying, there's a great quote. It's from, I think you'll probably remember this, Brooke. It's from, what's his name? Viktor Frankl, in the book, Man's Search for Meaning. Fabulous book. He was an Austrian psychiatrist, and during the Holocaust, he was in the camps, and he obviously survived, and he wrote a book. And he said one of the reasons he survived is because, quote, between stimulus and response lies a space. And in the space, we have the power to choose our response. And it's in our response lies our freedom and our growth. So whenever some situation happened in the camps, rather than react to the situation, he created space to figure out and thought, like, what would serve me best in this situation? Right. Parents, when you have that stimulus going on with your teen and they say something or do something that you're just like, remember, don't ignore it thinking it might get better or go away. In that moment, you feel that stimulus, stop for a moment, get quiet, create the space, take a deep breath or count to 10 or even walk away, so that you can then neutralize yourself to say, what would be the best thing for me to do right now in this situation? And then act upon it, because then it'll be probably a much more respectful way of responding to what it is versus reacting to whatever it is.
I don't know whether you remember this in our conversations before, but I've put together basically 4 rules that accommodate that. And without going too deep, they're disengage, disengage, and disengage. And actually, the fourth rule is the precursor to all of that, which is don't just do something, sit there, which is that space creating piece.
Yep.
It's like sit in that discomfort and let it wash through, because then we can come back into response, choice, something different.
100%. But that takes a lot of maturity and a lot of discipline for us parents, because our own issues show up in those moments too.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think the lovely piece about parenting, especially teenagers, is the gift that they're giving us to be able to temper this one.
How many people are out there like, yes, thanks, Brooke, that's such a gift. But it is. You know,
it gives us so much more potency in every other relationship that we have.
100. Yeah. How do you do that? How do you do relationships? And again, it's modeling. You know, parents, if you really want your kids to figure out something in a healthy way, make sure you're doing it. That's huge. Like, was it Gandhi back in the 30s? A woman brought her 12-year-old son to see him, to tell him to stop eating so much sugar. And when she requested that from Gandhi, Gandhi's response was, come back in 2 weeks. So the woman came back with the 12-year-old 2 weeks later and said, will you please now tell my son not to eat so much sugar? And he looked at the boy and said, boy, stop eating so much sugar. It's not healthy for you. And the mom basically said, is that it? You couldn't have told him that 2 weeks ago? And Gandhi's response was, 2 weeks ago, I was eating too much sugar. So it leads you into that other quote of Gandhi: be the change you wish to see. There was no way he was going to tell a boy not to eat so much sugar while he was eating sugar. Like, and that's the thing, parents, what you're wanting from your kids, you want them not to have so much screen time. Check out your screen time. Are you able to put it down? You know, are you at a certain time? You know, sometimes parents are like, well, my kids should have it done or off by 9 o'clock or at night. I'm like, are you off at 9? Well, I have work. If you and it's the same thing about one thing I learned about because I had 4 teenage boys at the same time, and I remember standing in the doorway of the kitchen, like, you're not leaving the kitchen until the dishes are done. You know, my boys are all 6'8". They could have easily picked me up and just said, woman, move, you know. They didn't. They're like, no, you're not. So there was a man who had older kids than I that did, you know, was doing the kind of the work that we do. And I'm like, how do you do this with your kids? He said, Susie, here's some of the best advice I got that I'm offering to you. You want your kids to clean the kitchen? Just do it with them.
Right.
You want them to clean their room? Clean. If you want them to brush your teeth, 6-year-olds, go brush your teeth with them. Like, the easiest way, I'm like, do it with them. It's their job. They're like, it's about teaching cooperation and teamwork. I'm like, oh. So I tell parents today, do stuff with them, but do it with the intent of teaching cooperation and teamwork, not with the intent of enabling or rescuing, because they'll feel the energy coming on how you are putting it out there.
Right.
So if you're coming from a place of cooperation, it's great. And then, they learn to work how you do teams, And
I think that there's another component to that as well. And this is a tricky one with teens, is little kids want all of our attention. Teenagers, not so much. But if we've developed this through their teenage year or through their early years into their teens, there is this place of, you are welcome to hang out. You're a welcome part of this because you're integral to their fabric, if you will. And then they're able to differentiate from that and come back. But this is that piece that has to be developed of, I'm not subjugating you. I'm just here hanging out, teaching, and being with you. And I'm listening. This is the one thing that you taught me years ago in that place of, if my house is the house where everybody wants to come to. I know what everybody's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if my child likes being here and the neighborhood likes being here, this is optimal. And then again, that separation in the teen years becomes them coming to you, not necessarily your kids, but their teenage friends when something is awry.
Yes, 100%.
Community.
Community. The thing is, it's so funny, sort of, is that teenagers want so badly to be connected to their parents.
Yep.
And their behavior so often doesn't appear to make that a true statement. But when asked, that's who they want to go to. There was a study done of 1,000 teenagers. When asked, who would you like to go to when you have a problem or an issue? Almost every teenager said, my parent. Then asked, well, who do you go to? Almost every teenager said, anybody but my parent. Then asked, why don't you go to your parent if that's where you want to go? And they said, because if we do, we get yelled at, grounded, lectured, or our parents are so upset, but we told them they won't sleep for the next 3 months. So why would we tell them? So you can see there's some conflict here because they want to talk to us, but they also know us. They know our routine. They know how we react to things. And so you're right. Like if that can be developed early, that doesn't have to be that way. But not everybody had that information when the kids were younger, but it's never too late. Like ever, never. The thing is, kids love us. Kids are so forgiving of parents. It's ridiculous how much we can yell at them or be, and they keep coming back because they love us. And the thing is, when we're criticizing our teens, it doesn't really take them from loving us, but what they do with that criticism, they stop loving themselves. So, the more we criticize them, tell them how bad they're doing, how they ruined the whole year of school, they haven't paid attention, now you're not playing sport. That's just in them, and it's building and building and taking away the self-love that they have, which is the last thing we want to do for a teen.
It requires a huge amount of, you said discipline, and I think that's absolutely spot on. And I think it also requires risking a huge amount of personal vulnerability with our kids. And, having that willingness to, again, get down in and listen to everything that they have to say about everything that they have to say.
And to agree to disagree. I mean, the absence of communication between parents and teens is usually because of not agreeing. So why don't you just agree not to agree? I get to tell you stuff, and we can agree or disagree. You can tell me stuff, and I can either agree or disagree. But bottom line, at least we're telling each other stuff, and that's the connection that the teens want.
Arlo Guthrie said that we all have a responsibility not just to listen to what somebody else has to say, but to accept it as a challenge to our own beliefs and to use that in service of other people. And I love that, because when we're talking with our teens in this, it's an opportunity for everybody, when that agree to disagree, to expand our own understandings of what's in the field. And that builds not just a healthy team, but a healthy community.
Yes. You said something that made me think, that the thing is, because we all have different ways of learning. We have the auditory style, the visual, and the kinesthetic. These conversations that we're talking about, Brooke and I, like for your auditory learners, the ones who learn best by listening, these conversations, it can be really huge and very impactful. If you have more of a visual learner, someone who learned by seeing, it might serve you to write things down for them, like in a letter or a text. Or I remember this one dad was telling a story about a 14-year-old daughter that they didn't communicate much verbally. And so he didn't know how to put it out there, how much he loved her or cared for her. So he started writing post-it notes. He would write little affirmations to her, I love you more than the moon and stars, or hey, have a great day, thinking of you. And he'd put these post-it notes like in the bathroom, or maybe on her pillow, or in a book, or in her lunch. And he never really knew what she was going to do with them, but he knew that every time she saw one, it would be like this visual affirmation of the love he had for her. And so one day he actually went to her bedroom for something, and he was walking out of the bedroom. He noticed on the back of her bedroom door all the Post-it notes.
Wow.
So she had been saving them so that every day she walked out into the world, the last thing she saw was the love that her dad had. So that's something like that is for the visual learners. For the kinesthetic learners who learn best by processing, by moving, they kinesthetic folks can't just sit and have a conversation. I mean, I'm kinesthetic. You probably have noticed if this is on live video, I move a lot because it's me. I can't process. I'll lose track of what you're saying if I'm not, and I don't purposely do it. It's just what I've learned. I just do to process. So with my boys, especially 3 out of 4, they're very kinesthetic. And so I got my best conversations with them outside shooting baskets. So they're all basketball players, and we'd be out in the driveway and they'd shoot and I'd rebound and throw it back out. And those were our conversations. We're out in the ocean when we were all out there body surfing or whatever. Like, that's where I had a lot of conversations with them. I have one son is very auditory. So sitting down and having conversations with him works, even though it's not my strength. So it's really figuring out what your child's learning mode is, and that's how you teach them.
How do you get there? How do you discover what your child's learning process is?
I mean, there's a lot of books. There's one, Donna Makova is an expert on this, and she had a book that's renamed now, but back in the day it was called, I think it was called How Your Child is Smart, because it's basically all kids are smart. They just learn differently, right? But in a general, the kids who are constantly moving around and, they're running around the house and you're like, did you hear a word I said? And they tell you verbatim everything you said. You're like, oh, how did you hear this? How did you take that? You weren't even paying attention, but those are the kinesthetic kids. Like athletes are kinesthetic kids. They say one of the best ways to hide something from an orthopedic surgeon is put it in the middle of a textbook because they don't want to read, they want to do it. So it's the people that are always doing, like move, it's a lot of movement, right? And then visual kids, you can, they're, how you can tell is because, well, like me, I hardly ever say, I hear what you're saying. I normally say, I see what you mean.
Okay.
And because I am so visual, whenever someone says stuff to me, it goes in and I see it, and then I can respond to it. And then the auditory child, they're like the little Buddhas in the classroom. They sit very still. And they, the teacher's talking and they just take it in. Like teachers love auditory learners because they sit still and they take in the information that way. So, but if visual people like to watch movies and they learn best by, they have pictures on their wall or posters all over the room. Like you can tell visual people like that too. But I'm sure nowadays you could probably Google a test and you find out, a test to figure it out. But, you can even ask your kids, how do you learn best? By listening, by doing, or by seeing?
So a couple of things that I want to touch on before we're done here today, Susie. One is we're transitioning back into some semblance of being outside or normalcy or whatever the coming and goings of your child's norms are. And there has been this huge dependency on the screen, on electronics. And we want to be able to pull our children back out of that
Mm-hmm.
and into engagement again, not through this medium, but through contact, through engagement. How do you suggest parents start, especially again with teenagers, to engage in that process without being critical of you're spending too much time on? Because I think your point of how much time are you spending is really valid in that. And I'm just interested in your thoughts about that.
Like I feel like the more I look at the screens and the video games that kids are playing, especially through this quarantine, is a lot of them are playing with their friends, right? So
Right.
That was the way they interacted. So it's not all screen time is bad.
Mhm.
It's been a lifesaver for some kids because it's the one time they got to connect, which is what they want, right, more than anything. And so it's about balancing. So in my teen workshops, I talk about juggling. So if you watch YouTube, a juggler, they juggle 3 balls, and if they're really good, they have someone throw in a 4th and a 5th and a 6th ball, and they're juggling 6 or 7 balls. But if they start dropping them, they always go back to the initial 3 balls that they were juggling at the beginning, just to get those balanced out, right, before they add more. In the world of parenting, the analogy I use is all your kids have 3 main responsibilities, just like the 3 balls, but 3 responsibilities: school, family, and let's say sports or physical exercise. And so as long as, what does that mean? That means, for family, they're coming down for dinner. They're not in their room 12 hours a day when, if the family is doing something or there's responsibilities to do, that they do it without the arguments. School, that that they're getting, like, you ask your kid, what would you feel okay with, what GPA, rather than saying your potential, you have the ability to have a 4.0, so you have to, no, who cares about the ability or the potential? And by the way, parents, every time we use the word potential, we are now bringing in our own issues, so you might want to stay away from that word. But what would you feel like? Because I was just talking to a 14-year-old kid yesterday, and I'm like, so are you back in school? He goes, yeah. I go, how is it? I go, is it fun being with your friends? He goes, yeah, but it's hard. I feel like I've lost a lot because of not really being in school for a year. And I'm like, yeah, like they're dealing with that too. Because, a lot of kids kind of got to slide with this one. So what's the GPA look like, so to speak? And handing homework in time, assignments on time. And then physical exercise is like getting yourself ready, getting yourself bags packed, and getting yourself to sport, or going out and walking every day, or bike riding every day, something. So as long as those 3 main responsibilities are in place, then the added responsibilities, which is screen times or cars or more screen time, that's fine. Because bottom line, parents, our job with these teens, by the time they leave to go wherever they're going to go, is that they know how to self-manage themselves. And it's not you managing them. This is your chance, whether you have 2 years left with them or 5 years or 10 years with them. This is a time that they have to figure out. And so if their grades are going down, or they're not showing up for dinner, or they're being rude at the dinner table, or they're not doing physical activity, first thing goes is all the extra balls, so to speak, in the juggling world, like all the extra responsibilities. And it's not to punish them. You're just saying, by your actions, you're showing us that these other responsibilities, screens, cars, or whatever it might be, Xbox, they're getting in the way of your main responsibilities. So get your 3 main responsibilities back into place, and you can have all your other responsibilities. So it's actually using the word responsibility, not privileges or any of that stuff that we think we should call. And I've had so many parents tell me, them just explaining it to their teens that way made so much sense, because there's no judgment. There's no, making them feel bad that they're doing something wrong. It's about, saying it's time. Self-management is here.
And it's about their responsibility and their responsibility to themselves, not something outside of that.
Yes. Very well put. Yep.
Okay. No, as I'm listening to you with that one, I think bringing in the choices that go along with that, and them having that, you talk about choices versus punishment, or consequences versus punishment, and all of this, and this is really putting it back in their court. This is your choice, and as soon as you make the correction, it's there. It's not, I'm grounding you for a week or a month or 2 months or whatever the ridiculous things that parents do. It's like, this is a self-corrective mechanism for you, dude.
Exactly. It's up to you how long you want this other stuff not to be there.
Right. And as soon as I love that.
And it works. I would tell parents, so have the teens Google juggling, and have them see what you're talking about. Like for the visual learners, that's how they're going to learn, not just having the conversation, but showing them, this is what I'm talking about. You see how he just dropped the balls and now he went back to the main 3? That's what we're talking about with responsibilities. No longer privileges. I want you to know how to have a screen, and I want you to be okay having screens and then still get to work or still get to exercise. My ultimate goal for you is when you leave the world, you can manage all of this, because it's all going to be there, parents. And so if they're not learning it now, managing it could be a little rough road for them when they move on. At least they have you to help them kind of manage it, or, you know, on how it looks for a bit.
Well, we're their first best teacher.
Yep. Yes.
And to your point earlier, they want to be with us.
Yes.
And if we're creating an environment that is conducive to that, that isn't, that is inviting, that is engaging, that is a learning experience for them, that they're not being, I think one of the things that parents do is go do that. Nobody's ever shown them how to do that. And that's what parenting is showing them how to do that, whatever that is. And kids love that experience because they have you right here. And that is true of teenagers too.
And so there's 4 steps to that. Like the first step is you doing whatever that might be. Like let's say you've been making breakfast every day forever. And you're like, it's time for my teen to figure out how to cook breakfast too. So the first step you've been doing. The second step is you have them start watching how you make breakfast or lunch or dinner, or whatever it is. So that's the second step. They watch you for a while, for a few days, for a week or whatever, and they see how the process looks. The third step is now you watch them do it and you help correct anything that needs to be self-corrected, right? And then the fourth is handing them that responsibility. But there's a lot of connection in that time, and it can be fun. First they're the sous chef and then you become the sous chef, and it works whatever age. But you're not just saying, okay, from this point on, Brooke, it's your turn. You just start making your own breakfast. You're like, okay. And then like the next morning, you're like, where's the pans? Where are the eggs? My mom used to say, like, where's the milk? She goes, it's in the oven. And then I do the same to my kids. I love doing that.
So anything else you want to add in here as we wind this down, Susie?
I just want to tell parents, hang in there, and remember, we're not looking to go back to how it was. That really wasn't working well for a lot of people. It's the new normal. And you get, like I said in the beginning, you get to create the story that you want. Did you guys connect during this time? You still have time. We're not totally off this, and be honest with your kids, truth and honest. Like when you're having a hard day, say, I'm having a really hard day today. I had to go back in the office. That was great and crazy at the same time. It's like you, I had to text you, like, I'm 10 minutes late for this podcast. I haven't been on Encinitas Boulevard in El Camino at lunchtime forever and a day. That's crazy over there. You know what I mean? Like, it's about, but to be honest with them, be vulnerable. Yep. Don't try to be anybody else other than who you are. Yep. As a teenager, remember your time as a teenager, okay? And some of you probably were awesome and just did everything right, but a lot of us didn't do everything right. We really, thank God there wasn't social media and phones so our parents could check on us all the time. So just remember, you were a teen once and they're just trying to figure out how to live life.
Right. All right, Susie, thanks for coming in. This has been episode 138, Dealing with Teens, A Map to Sanity with Susie Walton. You can find Susie at indigovillage.com. She has awesome parenting classes. She has classes on dealing with teens. I know that you've got one coming up. I just saw it pop up on my email. This is an ongoing podcast that's going to be out there for a long time. So whoever's listening to this, whenever you're listening to this, go to her website. Awesome material there. She's a great teacher. She taught me everything that I know. And thank you again for being with us, Susie.
Thank you so much. So great hanging out with you, Brooke.
Take care, everybody.
Brooke, people don't have to wait until Friday mornings to get more content. If this is something that's helpful for them, right? This isn't the first time you've broadcast anything or recorded anything or put anything out there in the world. What are the other ways people can get the help more aggressively or speed up their recovery process? What materials are available for people right now?
Well, I've written a book called The Black Hole of High Conflict, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle. And everything that we're talking about is really compressed and put into there. So this is a really good starter place to get in and get your mind working and to see what these concepts are about and how to start to apply them. The other place that I think that is valuable is to go to our website and look at some of the blog articles that I've written. Those are available there as well. They go into some of these other arenas, and that's at www.highconflict.net. So the book, the website are also really good places to get the material. And also we have classes. We have high conflict diversion program classes that you can get into and get some one-on-one help with this as well.
And you know me, I'm aggressive. Whatever I want to become good at or learn, I find someone who's good at it and pay them and hire them and shorten my learning curve. What if somebody just wants your help? Somebody says, Brook has this information. He's good at something I'm not good at yet, and I want to work with him. Do you have any type of coaching or consultations or anything like that?
Absolutely, I do. I do one-on-one coaching for custody cases. I help people get ready for family court services. If you've got that in your community, I work with attorneys and clients to help them with managing and strategically setting them up to have more successful cases as well.
And how do they reach out? You want them to just go to the website or email or phone, or what's the best way for them to reach out, raise their hand, and say, I need some help?
They can email me. My direct email is brook at highconflict.net. That's BROOK at highconflict, HIGH, conflict.net.
Perfect. That's everything everybody would need to get some help, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brook.